Noon broke down Utah's asking price for Donovan Mitchell yesterday. They want a majority of the 8 first-round picks the Knicks can trade. They also want pick swaps. They also want some combination of Quentin Grimes, Emmanuel Quickley, Obi Toppin, Miles McBride, and Cam Reddish. They also want everyone's firstborn.
The Donovan Mitchell situation picked up a lot of steam, especially because, without a doubt, he's probably the leading person to get traded, even over the likes of Kevin Durant. As a matter of fact, it seems like Kevin Durant isn't going to get traded anymore, which we're gonna make a whole other video on that for you guys really soon. But we need to bring you guys this insane trade that almost happened but didn't happen because either the Utah Jazz asked for too much or the New York Knicks just didn't want to include one specific player. So before we get to the content, man, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. If you want 1-minute shorts of this content, then I highly recommend you follow us on TikTok and Instagram at TheFlightMike. Now that we got all that out of the way, cue the intro. Check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? The Utah Jazz have been playing their rebuild absolutely phenomenally. I mean, both the Utah Jazz and the Indiana Pacers get a lot of respect from me, primarily because I didn't think the Utah Jazz would decide to blow up the core of Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. I didn't think they would get the haul that they did from the Minnesota Timberwolves for Rudy Gobert. The fact that they were able to do that was incredibly impressive to me. But on top of that, I think it takes a specific amount of balls, some cojones, to go ahead and say to your franchise cornerstone, your most successful player in the past decade, and probably your greatest success over the past decade in terms of talent evaluation, that you're willing to trade him despite him having 3 years left on his contract. And to be honest, it was done in a very respectful way. It wasn't done in a way where they said, hey, we're gonna trade Donovan Mitchell. It was more so done in a way where they said, hey, we look like we're headed towards a rebuild. If you give us an offer that we just simply can't refuse, then obviously we're going to accept it. Very similarly to the offer that they got for Rudy Gobert, which still to this day absolutely blows my mind that they got what they got for Rudy Gobert. So ultimately, the top team that could trade for Donovan Mitchell, that entered the fold for trade discussions involving Donovan Mitchell, was the New York Knicks. And this is one of those situations where everybody knew what was going down. We got a report from none other than Champ Charania that Tuesday night saying that the New York Knicks could quickly put together a trade package for Donovan Mitchell. And the reason why we're saying this is the New York Knicks are in the best position to go ahead and trade for Donovan Mitchell. It'd be nice for them to have a shooting guard. They just recently broke the bank on Jalen Brunson, which to me, still trying to wrap my head around that decision. Some Knicks fans are excited, some Knicks fans are disappointed. Mark Cuban doesn't know how he feels about the tampering that went on behind that. But here's what the Knicks could potentially offer for Donovan Mitchell. They have significant draft capital after the way they maneuvered the NBA draft. They're in a situation where they have 11 first-round picks over the next couple of years via the NBA draft. And as we saw from this past NBA draft, the New York Knicks are perfectly content with the amount of young talent they already have on the roster. As a matter of fact, you saw Cam Reddish virtually getting no playing time at all whatsoever because there's just way too many young players on that roster. So obviously the New York Knicks want to cash in some of these young players and get themselves a bona fide superstar in New York. So it was one of those situations that in my video, I said it made way too much sense for it not to happen. I mean, after all, the Knicks just have way too many assets, way too many draft picks. They don't want to use all those draft picks on young players. So why on earth hasn't a trade gone down? Well, according to Tony Jones of The Athletic, which you know how we feel about The Athletic on this channel, guys. We don't ever question The Athletic. He recently said in a podcast that Utah actually was really close to trading Donovan Mitchell to the New York Knicks. But talks fell through. You might be wondering why on earth would talks fall through at this point? Well, wait until you see the asking price that the Utah Jazz had for the New York Knicks. So according to Tony Jones, the Utah Jazz offered Donovan Mitchell to New York for 6 future first-round picks plus Quentin Grimes, Emmanuel Quickley, Obi Toppin, and Miles McBride, but the New York Knicks backed away from that proposal. Now, here's the thing. If you're a New York Knicks fan, you might be thinking that the Utah Jazz are absolutely insane insane. But when you look at those players, first of all, Emmanuel Quickley, Quentin Grimes are two players that the Utah Jazz have always been very excited about. Obi Toppin is another nice young piece that you could get excited about. So I don't know if this is a situation where the New York Knicks didn't want to trade RJ Barrett, or if it was a situation where the Utah Jazz weren't interested in RJ Barrett, because we also heard a report earlier that RJ Barrett is in line for a huge payday. And the issue is that the Utah Jazz don't want to be tasked with a situation where they need to pay a player like RJ Barrett over $100 million over the lifespan of his next contract. Now, I'm going to say I'm personally a big believer in RJ Barrett. I think he's been developing really well. He just recently had his first 20 points per game season. He's been developing as a defender as well. A player that I would have no problem building around in the future, especially if I'm a rebuilding team and I have the resources to invest in him. But it also is important to note that Tim McMahon and Zach Lowe said that RJ Barrett is not believed to be the deal breaker in discussions between the Knicks and the Jazz on Donovan Mitchell. The Jazz's desire to get him is unclear to Zach Lowe. He might not be the deal breaker people think it is. Barrett is eligible for a contract extension coming off of his rookie contract this offseason. Utah might prefer additional picks from the Knicks in lieu of Barrett. The New York Knicks also have young players with promise in Emmanuel Quickley, Obi Toppin, and Quentin Grimes, but according to Zach Lowe and Tim McMahon, I'm not clear either on RJ Barrett because I don't know that the Jazz, who all indications are they are going into a full-fledged Oklahoma City style rebuild, which I think is the right direction. I don't know if the Jazz want to get a young player that they have to immediately pay, possibly a max rookie extension. I think they're going in the direction of stockpiling picks, taking flyers on young, inexpensive talent, and then financial flexibility. Look, I'm all for that, but at the same time, it's important to note that if you are going to pay RJ Barrett a max contract extension right now, by the time that contract runs out, the players that you begin to draft next year will be in line for a max rookie contract. So you could definitely afford to pay RJ Barrett and just see what you have in him, maybe boost his value, because something that the OKC Thunder also do is they trade for undervalued talent, then hype them up, pump up their value, and then ship them off to other teams. I mean, a famous example is when they traded Russell Westbrook for Chris Paul. Chris Paul was literally about to be bought out, or there were rumors about him potentially being bought out. The Thunder said no. They ended up having Chris Paul play a whole season with their young core, and then traded him for a first-round pick and some other players to the Phoenix Suns. They did the same exact thing with Al Horford. Sam Presti traded Terrence Ferguson, Danny Green, and Vincent Poirier to the 76ers for Al Horford, Theo Maledon, and the draft rights to Vasilij Micic and a 2025 first-round pick. And by the way, RJ Barrett is nowhere in his career as to where Chris Paul was when he was acquired by the Thunder, or Al Horford was when he was acquired by the Thunder. He has a ton of promise and a ton of development to go. I think it's worth trying to trade for RJ Barrett, as opposed to being in a situation where you're going to have additional first-round picks. We don't know if the OKC Thunder model is going to pay off yet. They're still in the middle of a rebuild, I have to admit. It looks a lot of fun. I mean, it looks like something that you would do in a NBA 2K My League, but I don't necessarily know if it's going to be effective. At least they have direction and they're not in purgatory, and they just drafted Chet Holmgren and had like 3 picks in the lottery this past year. But ultimately, this is why trade talks fell through. The Utah Jazz wanted 6 future first-round picks, which, bear in mind, the New York Knicks could happily oblige this trade request and still have draft picks in the vault for additional moves. It's not like they're going to be completely emptied and capped out and screwed as a result of this trade. I feel like if the Utah Jazz targeted RJ Barrett, maybe lowered the amount of draft capital they're expecting for Donovan Mitchell, then a trade would eventually get done. But the thing is, the Utah Jazz have no urgency because they have all the leverage in the world. They can just sit back, relax, and just wait until they get an offer that they can't refuse, whether it's now or during the NBA trade deadline. But they lose all their leverage when Donovan Mitchell starts acting out and voicing his frustration with the Utah Jazz. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about all this, man. Do you think the New York Knicks made a mistake not trading 6 future first-round picks, plus Quentin Grimes, Emmanuel Quickley, and Obi Toppin and Miles McBride for Donovan Mitchell? Or do you think the Utah Jazz are just in over their heads? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.